We have some very strong opinions and ideas, and I think we'll probably state those opinions now.
Okay. Morning, German. How are you?
I'm good. Morning, Nick. How are you?
I'm good. I spent a lot of the weekend prepping for this.
That's always good when you have the host who's prepared.
So we're in for a little bit of a long one. For our regular listeners, I am going to put this all up probably as like one video that you can just listen to. But for everybody else, we're going to break this down into little mini episodes as we talk about the debate kind of section by section. So first, I want to dive right in. So first, I think what I'm going to do is we're going to just watch a quick highlight here of, can't talk and share at the same time. There we go. We're just going to watch this like really quick highlight reel of the whole debate before we sort of move in section by section. Where did it go? Okay. One of those days.
You can't hear it, Nicole.
Leaders saying one thing in French and another one in English.
While these two compete about who's more pro-pipeline, I think what we need to do is, it's clear. The Liberals bought a pipeline. They built a pipeline. I don't know what Pierre is complaining about.
You can't do something and the opposite, and you can't fill people's mind with nonsense.
Mr. Poilievre, you spent years running against Justin Trudeau on the carbon tax, and they're both gone. Okay, they're both gone. And we're in a new
impersonation of them with the same policies tonight.
Very different.
Justin Trudeau's staffers are actually here with you at this debate in Montreal, writing the talking points that you are regurgitating into the microphone. How can we possibly believe that you are any different than the previous 10 years of Liberal government?
25 seconds left in this segment for you to respond to that.
Look, I do my own talking points. Thank you very much.
Will you look at the camera in the eye and apologize to the many people who suffered as a result of the inflationary policies that you advised Justin Trudeau to implement?
You know, I said earlier, but I'm going to say it again. I know you want to be running against Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau isn't here.
Okay, those are just...
So that sort of sets the tone for what we can expect from the debate. One of the big things that came out of it as kind of like an intro, let's just talk about sort of who is trying to do what. So Pierre Poilievre was trying to do this sort of like soft rebrand. He really wanted to sort of give off this, I guess like being human is the best way to say this. A much softer, more prime ministerial, less attack doggy persona of his. He managed to stay, I don't know how much of the debate you managed to watch this weekend, German, but he managed to keep his cool pretty much through the whole thing. He interrupted people almost as much as Singh, but managed to kind of like stay cool instead of losing it like he's been known to do in the past. Mark Carney basically kind of walked into the debate looking like he almost wanted to moderate it himself. Just sort of the best way I could think to explain. He never interrupted anyone. And in fact, the closest he came was in that clip when Poilievre had said, like, they're writing your talking points, and he wanted to be like, I write my own talking points. That was sort of the closest I saw in either debate of him coming to interrupt anyone. But he was like super passive, very like dad-like, and sort of that like boring politician everybody wants to see right now. Jagmeet Singh was basically hanging on for dear life. I'm going to keep it sharing because we're going to go right into more clips. Yeah, so Jagmeet Singh was very like desperate. He kept interrupting everyone, as we'll see. We'll play a clip later. The French debate actually cut off his mic at one point because he wouldn't stop. And I think that was just, he was really trying to get it home that like, if you want to keep the liberals in check, you need to send us to Ottawa because we're the ones that got things like better healthcare and dental. Yeah, so I don't know. What did you actually I will stop. What did you think like out of the debate that you did see, articles you read, that clip?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in that situation. There's a lot of stuff that I could talk about in there. Everything you mentioned is true. Yeah, Pierre was definitely trying to be a bit more a bit more what's the word I'm looking for? A bit more calculated and a bit more focused on being softer and, like you said, human as well. Jagmeet Singh was trying to be desperate. That's exactly what most of the pundits would say, and that's what I would think too, from what I've seen and what I've read. He seemed like he was desperate for votes. He was desperate to create the relevancy that NDP are important people enough in the debates and in the government, or at least the opposition anyway, right? Yeah, Carney was pretty states-like and statesman-like in the debates for sure. And Pierre definitely tried to be a lot more on his best behavior, even though, yeah, you could tell he definitely was being the attack dog as he normally would be, right? But at the same time, Singh definitely interrupted a lot. He definitely took a lot of time to interrupt, and he wasn't afraid to interrupt. And a lot of the pundits would say, like, that is what happened. And I totally agree with them too as well, because NDP are struggling right now. They need that vote. They need some people to support them. And even Jagmeet Singh's seat, we know, and a lot of people have talked about it, is he's a top out and he's worried, right? And so he's worried right now. So he's worried for that opportunity. And of course, that's important for him to get that.
Seat, do you know? I assume it's an orange-red race right now.
Correct.
Writing,
Correct.
yeah.
Correct. But they say even the Conservatives could take those seats as well, depending on what they are. So it's not surprising. Like, I'm really not surprised by that, because like right now, Pierre is trying to be the prime minister, right? And he's trying to pivot, but at the same time, he's not doing a great job with that.
Well, and I guess the question is it too late? Because, and we'll show it. I did pull, everybody knows by now, I am not a Pierre Poilievre fan, but I tried really, really hard to make sure I was pulling his good moments, because I think people deserve to see those, especially if they didn't watch the debate. The question is, though, as we'll see, like, is it enough, and will people believe him? Because Pierre's facing a problem of 20 years of history, 20 years of being an attack dog. He's been an attack dog the whole time Trudeau was leader. And frankly, he was an attack dog until like 2 weeks ago. So does one debate where he's trying to connect with people and showing that he can do it, will that convince people that he will do it? Because I think that we can, from the debate and the clips that I'll show you, particularly one from his closing statement, he can do it. But the question is, do people believe that he will do it if they elect him as their prime minister, or does he get a majority government and then pivot right back? And if they do believe him, is it early enough in the campaign to stick with Canadians? Because remember, like, first off, early voting, and we'll talk about this later, is like record numbers right now. It's Easter weekend. That Thursday, the French debate ran on Wednesday. It had good numbers, and CBC did do like an English translation, but I know, like, out of everyone I know, I think I'm the only one that watched the French English translation debate. And then Thursday was frankly the start of Easter. Wednesday was still kind of a gong show because there was that Habs game. So I know there was a commentator on Power and Politics that flat up said, like, if it wasn't my job to have watched the French debate, I wouldn't have watched the French debate at all. I would have been getting ready and hanging out with friends for the Habs game. So how many Canadians are actually going to see that?
Yeah,
I don't
that's,
know.
and you bring up a good point there. I don't think many Canadians who don't understand French would watch that debate, to be honest with you. Why would you? Like, is it necessary? Like, and most of the time, the people who watch the French debate, like they said, are the people who are really involved in politics, prepping for it, or really wanting to know what they're talking about. But unless you live in Quebec and understand French, why would you watch it, right? It's
Well, and
not
even
important
though,
enough.
yeah, and even though, sorry, I'll send it right back to you in a minute, but even though they have an English translation, like, it really is more of like a Quebec sovereignty type debate. Like, a lot of the questions are focused on, like, what do these things mean for Quebec?
Exactly, and I don't think it's that important to watch. And most of the time, what they talk in French is geared towards people in Quebec and those areas. So it's not that important to watch. But you talk about whether Pierre is about, whether it's enough time for him to pivot. I don't know. It's people. 2 million people voted on Friday, so
Yeah.
like a lot of
And
people
more
voted,
over the weekend, it
and
sounds
more
like.
over the weekend. Exactly. And so right now, is it enough time? Probably not. Right. If I'm honest, but at the same time, are the people who are voting Conservative, Liberal, or NDP supporters? That would be the question to ask, right? And I think that's important to know. But who knows at this point? You wouldn't really know who's voting for who because these are secret ballots anyway. But at the same time, is it enough time? Probably not, for sure, because if 2 million people voted, and we've talked about voting early as well, is it going to really change your votes? And you already said where kind of you stand, and I think people can already sense where I stand as well.
Well, and that's sort of the thing, right? A lot of polling is currently showing that people have figured it out. Like, they basically know where they are. We'll talk about it later. It looks like Quebec and BC are a little bit unsure, but I'm not even sure. And we'll get into this more later. I think it's more going to come down to the ridings themselves. So, for example, Singh's riding, where it looks like it's a race between the Liberals and the NDP. Well, if that vote splits, what happens when a Liberal and NDP vote splits? The Conservatives come up the middle and take the riding. So I'm actually very interested to see what happens in Singh's riding, because I don't think historically any riding that has the leader of the NDP is not going to be happy with a Conservative MP. Like, it's just not happening, right? But because of that vote split, it has allowed in the past the Conservatives to come up the middle. And we've talked before about how Stephen Harper and Jack Layton basically used this to their advantages to put Layton in the official opposition, and Harper came up the middle in a lot of those close ridings to pass a Conservative majority. Like, that is how Conservatives get majority in Canadian elections. Right now, Poilievre is polling right at the numbers that Conservatives need to usually get a majority government in Canada. But because of the bottoming out of the NDP, it's a problem for them.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point there, and that's definitely a big problem. Yeah, and it's always been a big problem because that's where you start to. That's why the Conservatives merged into one party so they wouldn't split the votes, right? And so, like, that's a problem that the NDP and Liberals particularly have to really focus on, because if you start splitting this vote and not voting strategically, as some people have said on various outlets, media outlets in the country, they're voting strategically because they want the Liberals to win. But at the same time, if they're not voting for the Liberals, they're voting for the NDP. That's just splitting the vote to the left. And that's not good for anyone if they want a majority government for the Liberals.
And interestingly enough, we kind of talked about this a little bit. It wasn't in the notes, but since you bring it up, thinking about this, the Green Party tried to do this election, and it actually got them booted out of the leadership debate because they had said, so there's three, I'll remind people, there's three qualifications for being in a leadership debate. You have to reach two. The first one is having at least one MP holding a seat. The second is 4% support across Canada. And the third is MPs running, not MPs, what are they called? Candidates running in at least 90% of ridings. So the Greens on March 28 qualified under endorsing 90% of the candidates and having one seat in Parliament. The Bloc gets to do it because they obviously have one seat and they have 4% of support in Canada because Quebec's so big. However, strategically, the Greens decided we're not going to run candidates in any ridings where we could potentially cause Poilievre to win. This resulted in the LDC saying, oh, well, you don't have enough candidates now. And then the morning of the debate, they kicked him out, which causes problems because the Greens have always kind of had a big voice. And there is a debate, which we won't get into, but there is a debate amongst analysts about whether or not Greens should even be in the leadership debate. But let's put that aside for now. All of the leaders have been prepping for weeks for this thing with the understanding that there would be 5 people. Not that I think we should all feel bad for these candidates because they will adapt, but like that was one of the things, right? It was literally changed the morning of. They changed how that would look. Later, we'll talk about another debacle that changed the debate. But that's a problem.
Yeah, it definitely is a problem, Nicole. And it's one of those situations that, it's the morning of is something that it's not good.
Ridiculous time to do that.
It's a bad time. If you let them know a few days ago or maybe the night of, I can understand those things, right? And like you said, in case people aren't aware, LDC is Leaders Debate Commission, I believe.
Yes, it's leaders.
So, because just in case people don't know what that stands for, they thought maybe something else, but it's like it's definitely a mess, right? And I know there was huge uproar about this is terrible, this is not good, it's about democracy and stuff like that. And my take on it, it's just bad, right? It just doesn't look good. They fit most of the requirements except for that last requirement of, I think it's 90% or whatever, the ridings. They don't want to, and I get why they wouldn't, but at the same time, they have 2 seats, I believe, in Parliament now, and they represent a certain percentage of the vote. Yes, they don't represent a huge percentage. Yeah, they don't have the 90%, but you let them know pretty much the morning of the debate, which is absolutely terrible. And we know how stressful those debates are. You know how much prep goes into those debates. So it just doesn't look good for democracy. I can understand you let them know maybe a few days before. It seems like it was even made decision. It was a decision made a few earlier, right? So at least they can give them some time to notice about it. So there's lots of other problems that happen, but that's not good for democracy anyway.
Yeah. Well, and do you know the story of how that even broke? Yeah. So for our listeners, we're not even sure that they would have announced it as soon as they did. But basically, Chantal, and I'm going to mess up her last name. I think it's Chantal Hebert. Thank you. I was trying to figure out the French pronunciation. She got a tip off the night before and that they were going to do this. And so I was watching Good Talk on Friday, and she said she actually went down to Radio Canada where they were holding it all and looked in the window to see how many podiums they had. And then she ran her story. And so then they had to and then they had to come out and say, and in her story, she basically said oh, did one of the podiums have to get rebuilt? Or are you actually going to kick out the Greens? Obviously, it was pretty obvious at that point that
she broke the story. I remember watching, I don't think it was Good Talk per se. I think it was actually at Issue Panel that night.
She did. That's where she broke it to begin with. But she told the story of her going down there and stuff on Good Talk on Friday when they were discussing it, and she was quite proud of herself, and it was
I think she should be. She broke the story, right? And she did a good job with that, like I said, and she offers a really good job, and she always does. She's a very strong Quebec voice in her area, right? So
she's also hilarious.
Yeah, she reminds me of a family friend. Let me tell you that much.
She's so funny.
Every time I look at her, I think of my family friend. I don't know whether good or bad. She has the same mannerisms too.
Oh, that's hilarious. Okay, let's move on to